Alright, this is Chapter 5 Intermission. Where in the world is Meenah Pisces? Meenah has to avoid her own coronation.
The sands of time flow like an hourglass. A perigee passes since we last met our Before and Rogues gallery. Meenah fails to court her friends onto her team for the upcoming game. Normally, I would say not for lack of trying, but this was entirely for lack of trying. Unfortunately for her, responsibility has caught up, a fact she remembers only when there is a massive knock on her door.
Oh shit!
She says, sitting suddenly upright on her respite slab. She follows it up with,
Shit! Fuck! Shit!
she knows who it is. It's her. Her coronation day. It's the day she's supposed to take the crown. Another booming knock rattles the doorframe. Meenah's heart hammers in her chest in step with the knocks, nearly as loud in her ears, too. She hadn't formulated a plan, either. Again, entirely for lack of trying. She had hoped that she'd come up with a solution to the impending coronation by now, but she hadn't, and now the impulsive thief of life does what thieves do best. She steals away. Outside, a bemused benevolence turns to one of her drones. "Fetch the battering ram," she suggests calmly. Of course, being more forward-thinking than her descendant, expected this. Knocks turn into the irritable hammering of a battering ram on Meenah's front door, and in short order, the facade is blown off its hinges to reveal the empty entry hall of Meenah's palace. "Meenah!" the fairy barks inside. "It's time to face the music!" The fairy rubs her temples. She's been under a fair amount of stress lately, with the ever more frequent meteor showers requiring a deal of cleanup, the pesky insurrectionist, and of course now the errant heiress. The fairy looks around. Something isn't right. Meenah's never avoided her like this. "Meenah?" the fairy says, still loud, but more cautious. An explosion rocks the palace. The foundation clatters, and Feferi leans on her trident to steady herself. Feferi rushes outside with her drones just in time to see a pink spaceship rocketing into the distance. Meenah Pacius, most likely within. Feferi is dumbstruck. She stares, gaping after the vessel, but her awe quickly ferments into rage. She raises her trident and plunges it through one of her automaton drones, who falls over ineffectually, the drone collapsing like a rag doll. Two of its fellow automatons solemnly carried away. "Urgh!" the fairy bellows. But for all the good it did her, it didn't bring Meenah back. Meenah didn't feel great about this. She'd had to fly off pretty much last minute, and she had no doubts that the drones would be scouring the globe for her. She hated to impose, and most of all, she hated relying on others, but she knew she would have to make her way to the Pink Moon to lay low. Again. One of Meenah's frequent regrets in life was her lack of preparedness. She always adored lazing about and procrastinating, but too often, when it bit her in the ass, it bit hard. Each time she swore to never put anything off again, but here she was, on a last-minute getaway from her responsibilities. Hell, her entire goal of entering this game of hers was an elaborate getaway in itself. She sighed as she hurtled toward space, toward my home. I guess this is where it switches to Scratch.
I think
Oh,
you're gonna.
I'll do
It's the
Scratch this time.
same
Okay, cool.
character, yeah, because they're
Because I know you
narrating. Yeah.
wanted to, but
No, it's fine.
right. If it wasn't clear, it's me, Scratch narrating. Hello. She opened her phone, checking to see if she still had reception. Instead of text, she dialed a number. She hated to do this, too, to impose, to rely on someone, let alone her, let alone the person she should least trust with her emotions at this moment. But she was Meenah's only confidant.
Meenah?
Arania's voice said sleepily on the other line.
I fucked up.
Was Meenah's answer. There was a long silence before Arania replied.
Be specific.
She said, tiredly. It sounded like Meenah had woken Arania. Meenah knew that Arania was aware that today was the coronation, and judging from Arania's tone, she wouldn't be happy about Meenah's news.
I kinda ran away?
Meenah said, sounding unsure. Arania made a long sigh.
You ran away from the benevolence after you promised me.
I know what I fucking promised, Arania, but you don't understand.
Meenah's voice cracked. Arania paused. She'd never heard Meenah like this, vulnerable. It was rare, almost unnerving.
Look, Meenah, calm down. I'm sure we can...
No, I'm sick of playing this game with my best club and friends, Cirque. I can't be your little savior anymore. I'm just one...
Meenah's voice shuddered. Arania could hear her crying.
I'm just one Gil.
There was a drawn-out silence. Arania felt suddenly guilty for all the time she'd pressured Meenah into her role as heiress, all at once. She didn't speak, and Meenah broke the silence.
I can't be what you all want.
Meenah said quietly.
I'm me. I'm not some princess. I'm not going to be some empress.
Meenah's voice was pleading. It was imploring. She needed validation. She needed to hear Arania say that it was okay. Arania knew that, and she didn't have to be an empath to know. For Meenah had lived her whole life under the pressure of expectation, and Arania was the only person in this moment that could absolve her. Arania opened her mouth to speak, to say those words, but they caught in her throat. Arania squeezed her eyes shut, picturing every person the benevolence hurt, everyone the culling system harmed. Cancri, Matuna, the low bloods, the high bloods, the toil, the pain. Arania closed her mouth.
You need to go back.
And in that moment, Meenah's heart broke. As soon as Arania had spoken, she knew it was a grave mistake. She could hear Meenah go cold.
Wait.
She managed one syllable before Meenah hung up the phone. It was just as well. She'd just touched down in my front yard. In the following sweep, Feferi was absolutely furious. Not only were the meteor showers getting progressively worse, public opinion of her was stagnating, to say the least. "Tell me again," she said to a nervous-looking Teal Blood staffer. The professional-looking Teal Blood cleared his throat, adjusting a frilly shirt before reciting the results of the recent poll numbers. Who's the Teal Blood staffer?
Bucky, you undo random Teal Blood person.
Yeah, sure.
42%, Miss Paches.
He said, voice squeaking near the end. Feferi slammed a fist down on the desk. Approval ratings had never been below so much as 70. She scowled and waved her hand for the Teal to go, who obliged, scurrying away like a little mouse. Feferi put her face in her hands. All of her trustworthy advisors were long dead. Even the Grand Matron was gone now. She felt so crushingly alone. And now she didn't have the approval of her people. All because of that beach! Feferi hissed to herself. They hadn't been able to find Meenah, not her drones, not her endless throngs of Secret Service. She'd flown the coop. She was probably among the stars now. And worse still, the public suspected her. She hated this. The public loved Meenah for some reason, loved the idea that power could be turned over in a civil manner, and they saw Meenah's mysterious absence as far too suspicious, too convenient. There had been rumblings that the benevolence had done away with Meenah like olden times. After centuries of rule, she finally saw merit to how her predecessor ran things. "At least they wouldn't dare complain if I ran things the old-fashioned way," she muttered to herself, standing up, looking over one of her expansive windows down onto the city below. Her mind turned to the Grand Matron, and visions of another one of her associates. "Can't get any good Teal Bloods around here these days," she muttered sullenly. Years in the past. Many. In the same office, overlooking the same view, a much younger Feferi Pacius looked across a much younger city. That wasn't to say she was young, more like younger. Though, for the time, she still looked just as dour as we left her in the present.
Boss.
Came a voice from the doorway. It was a familiar Teal Blood, a sharp, cold-voiced woman known to her business associates by a fearsome mononym, the prosecutor. Unlike the weak-kneed Teal Blood of the present, the prosecutor was a welcome sight. Feferi's gaze relaxed. "Oh, Miss Pyrope," Feferi said brusquely. "I hope it's good news this time." The prosecutor straightened her jacket haughtily. Her crimson boots matched her glasses, which, in turn, matched her eyes, red and burnt out from blindness. For a blind troll, she was certainly skilled, as she should be, as the head of Benevolence's legal team. The prosecutor's horns jutted out starkly from her head, perfect cones under a perfect coif, rendered motionless from a rigorous regiment of brushing.
It is.
Said the prosecutor.
As a matter of fact, we've apprehended the two leaders of the insurrectionist gang, and they're being held for questioning.
The fairy breathed a sigh of relief. For sweeps, a roving gang of hoodlums had been waging war on the Benevolence. Her approval ratings were high, but she hadn't counted on outspoken minorities, much less ones endowed with funding. No doubt some high bloods bent on sending things back to how they were, blood supremacy and all.
We also took in several prominent members. It was as you predicted. Without their leaders, the organization is helpless. They're scattered to the wind.
The prosecutor took a bow. Humility would never be a virtue she could be accused of. Her imperious benevolence nodded. Good work, Miss Pyrope. I expect this success will be further expressed in your salary and accolades, the fairy said, sitting back at her desk with renewed satisfaction.
Naturally.
Said the prosecutor.
But the job isn't finished yet. We need to know their motivations and their co-conspirators. They couldn't have acquired their means alone.
Oh? The fairy cocked a brow. I would have guessed that they were dissatisfied aristocrats.
Negative, boss.
The prosecutor rested her hands on her pale white walking cane. At its top was the head of an alabaster dragon, an effigy, of course, of the prosecutor's Lucis.
They weren't Teal Bloods. It was a cerulean and a brown blood.
Brown? The fairy laughed. Oh, God, no doubt he got mixed up and indoctrinated into some conspiracy. What reason would a low blood have to rebel? I've done well for them all.
Maybe.
The prosecutor didn't sound convinced, but she wasn't here to criticize the Empress. Just do a job.
The cerulean's been on our radar for a while. Woman who goes by Punk Rock Duchess of Spiders and Pain. And the brown blood is a fellow who goes by the name,
The prosecutor hesitated, her nose crinkling.
the breeder.
Breeder? The fairy's nose wrinkled, too.
He communes with animals. His real name is Nitrum.
The fairy nodded curtly. Well, get any information they may have, and do what you will, Miss Pyrope. Memories. Fairy placed a hand against the glass of her window. She scowled at her own face, dimly reflected in the misty surface. That was the last she ever saw of the prosecutor. As she gazed up at the pink moon, she pondered where in the universe Meenah Pacious might be, her mind turning from memory to the present. Long story short, Meenah spent an extended stay at my manor. Short story long? Well, you'll have to read on to find out, won't you? For those of you keeping score, though, 2 periges have passed since the story's inception. A mere 10 remain before the game begins. Are you excited? I know I am. But I should impart something to you, dear reader. I said at the outset of this tale that I knew my days were numbered. I've omitted some facts, again, this time from you. Though it wasn't from cruelty, I do hope you understand. I know one thing about the game, one small factoid amongst the void that is my knowledge on the subject. Once the sweep is up and the game begins, I will be no more.
Dun, dun, dun.
Nice.
That's good, though.
The fairy is not a voice I ever do.
Yeah. I don't feel like any of us really do Pfeffery.
We rarely have a Pfeffery to read,
Right.
unfortunately.
I feel like the typical Pfeffery voice is so outside of like all of the voices
Any
I'm
of our-
capable of doing. Like
She's such a high soprano that none of
Yeah.
us can do her.
right, exactly. Closest is about the best we're getting with Pfeffery.
God, Professor Scratch this continues to be just such a good character.
I really love that story. It's really good.